Welcome to Greying Matters. Hello and welcome back to another recording. This will be week 3, which is kind of cool. I suppose I'm sort of out of the first couple of videos, not quite entirely out of the whole trying to get this channel discovered, but you know, it's a work in progress. So, like I say, welcome to the third installment of Greying Matters. I normally base these around or I have been basing them around the past couple of episodes around what I have been experiencing, mainly from a mental health standpoint, with regard to my working life, my job, and you know, all of the different kind of facets that exposes. You know, there's been a lot happening lately, and it all culminated last week in sort of being offered and then me ultimately rejecting a management position, which, you know, I'm totally I'm through it now. I don't really give it much thought at all. You know, last week it felt really significant, and I think that's why I struggled so much to I don't know, function at work maybe. You know, I was kind of quite down a couple of days, and you know, I was a bit blue. Just in general, I think my mind was always elsewhere to where I wanted it to be. And that was all because of a lot of the things that I discussed last episode. But, like I say, I don't really give it much thought now. It's been a little while. Just over 2 weeks now, I think. And I don't even think about it. You know, going into work now has become quite leisurely, almost. Nothing has really changed in the workplace, if you know what I mean, but my ability to deal with it has changed to the point where now I can filter out the stuff that I don't want. And that's been really freeing. I know there's a lot of people there who just simply do not understand the decision I made, and that's fine. It is my decision to make, and I made it for the reasons that I made it for. And so there are a couple of people who are still sort of asking questions and kind of being quite prying with sort of, oh, why would you do that? Like, that seems silly, sort of thing. And there's been a little bit of that. But ultimately, like I say, I'm through it. I'm over the other side of that particular problem, and so have kind of had a very relaxed, uneventful week, really. You know, I think the nice thing about not having work on your mind all of the time is that it opens you to consume information from other spaces, and that's something I've very much struggled with in the past. You know, I've never kind of rarely had a free enough mind to be able to absorb information from a different source, if that makes sense. And so consequently, there have been a lot of different things that I've kind of ended up passing by and ignoring, or maybe better phrase is not getting round to doing, because, like I say, my mind has been so full up with other things. But this week has been a very, very different week from the past couple. You know, I really have been able to kind of distance myself from all of that negativity and just focus on things that I want to focus on, which has been really nice. So I think the majority of the time I've talked about it towards the end of the recording. So I'm going to kind of interject it here, really, to kind of lead on to what I'll end up talking about. But the whole point of this is to just sort of unravel my mind for about 30 minutes. You know, this whole, dare I say, podcast series, it's all just unraveling my mind in front of everybody and kind of, you know, letting you know what I think and taking ownership of what I think, which is a big one. But yeah, so that's basically what this 30-minute section is for. There's no real structure or, you know, regimented kind of, I can only talk about these things. You know, this is a kind of, for me, it's a bit of a free space. I just get to come in here for, you know, 30 minutes or so and just talk about whatever's on my mind. And so that that is very much the bread and butter of this channel, and so this week we're going to take a bit of a departure from what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks and sort of put some feelers out and see what you think about some other things that I often think about. And because of the freedom that my mind has been experiencing this week, I've actually been able to commit myself to a lot of my other hobbies, which has been super nice. The one that kind of is at the forefront of my mind at the moment is learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons. It's something that I suppose growing up I was aware that it existed. I did know that it was a thing, but I had no concept of what the game actually was, and I certainly didn't have anybody who I knew that played it or was part of that kind of community and stuff like that. And so I was aware of it, and I think there may have been a cartoon at some point that may have been on TV, and I may have seen a little bit of it or something like that, but largely it wasn't something that really entered my radar at all. And as you go through life, Dungeons and Dragons and D&D keeps on coming back up, and you hear it from time to time just to remind you that it still exists. But a couple of years ago, it was actually Hannah, my fiance, who just kind of rolling through YouTube as you do, found Critical Role. For anybody who knows Critical Role, you'll know that it's become this global phenomenon. But for anybody that doesn't, it's basically a group of voice actors, very well known if you're kind of into sort of video games and anime and animation and all of that kind of stuff. Some of the names that kind of float around in Critical Role, they are very, very famous people, if you're in the right circles. And yes, so they basically got together and they play Dungeons and Dragons together. And the thing that's kind of the allure, I suppose, of Dungeons and Dragons is the role-playing aspect, being able to kind of embody a character and make decisions based on that character's sensibilities, and hopefully keep them alive long enough to fulfill a story arc, or kind of even just give them sort of like a brief adventure or something like that. And I love that idea. I really do. It's something, I think there's an amount of it that sort of, I've always subliminally wanted something like that, something with complete creative freedom to just mess with and just have fun with. And I didn't totally, Dungeons and Dragons was always kind of sold to me as a very complicated game, something that was, the bar of entry was quite high. There was a lot of different aspects to it that were confusing and complicated and complex, and that is still very much true. But over the past couple of months, I've sort of been able to find quiet moments to sort of like sit and read the player manual and the Dungeon Master's Guide and all of that kind of stuff. And then we've been watching a lot of it on Critical Role and various other places. I think Hannah's very recently discovered what's it called? Dimension 20, I believe it's called, another channel on YouTube, which obviously feel free to check these out if you probably have already heard of them. I can't imagine that a channel of my size at this point in time is going to be recommending new things to people. But yeah, so basically the allure of Dungeons and Dragons, I think, has always sort of been deep-seated there. It's something that I've always been interested in or intrigued by. But I've never really known how to play it or anything like that. So we finally decided a couple of months ago to take the plunge and learn how to play it, and it's been so much fun. The level of freedom and sort of the level of just, I love lore. I love like world building and lore. I love all of that kind of thing because it's very, to me, it I don't know, it enriches every experience that I've ever kind of experienced it with, something like The Witcher, one of my favourite, I was going to say video games, but I should probably say franchises, that has ever existed. I really, really love the source material and everything like that. I've read the books, played the games, I've read comics and all sorts of different things. There's so much of that to consume. Obviously watch the Netflix show. There's so much of that to consume, and I absolutely love it, but there's so many bits that sort of, it's just world building, it's just fleshing out, it's just kind of character details, story details, world build details, stuff that to large extent doesn't actually affect the overall narrative, but it seals the realism of the world and sort of like the believability of that world. And I really, really, really enjoy it. And so ultimately, when I began diving into Dungeons and Dragons, there was something, like I say, it kind of felt like I was, what's the word I'm looking for? It was sort of like the culmination of a lot of different things. I'm an avid gamer. I've been playing games since I was about 5 years old, on various consoles, various types of games and stuff like that. And, every time I ever play a game or I finish a game or something like that, I'm always kind of like, wouldn't it have been cool if they'd done this? Or can you imagine if this happened? Or, maybe there'll be some downloadable content later down the line and it'll explore this particular aspect of it and stuff like that. And, having that ability, that freedom, that creativity to just sort of go with it, is something that I've always kind of enjoyed the idea of, but never really known how to express and how to kind of fundamentally do. I've tried like writing short stories, and I've illustrated comic books and stuff in the past, not professionally or officially, just stuff for myself. And I've done little bits like that from time to time, just to sort of scratch that itch, if you know what I mean. And it's very fun. I really do enjoy it, and so learning how to play Dungeons and Dragons has been an enormously satisfying thing to do. And this is the bit, I guess, where I will figure out what my audience is, or where they sort of sit on the scale of nerdiness and all of that kind of thing. Because I was trying to figure out, bearing in mind I'm not getting any help off anybody, I'm just going off information in the books, sort of what I'm seeing other people do on various channels and stuff that I follow, and just trying to kind of make even just a happy medium. Because I think the thing that's so interesting about Dungeons and Dragons is, yes, there are rules, and yes, there are kind of instructions on how to pursue certain things and certain aspects of the game, but ultimately you can, if you're just running a game like a home game, something for people that you're friends with or whatever, if you're doing that, you can just you can kind of ad-lib some of the rules and kind of say, okay, well, just roll this dice and we'll see what happens. And it's ultimately up to the game master or the dungeon master to then put those jigsaw pieces together in a way that is totally interesting and exciting for the people who are listening to you tell your story and everything like that. And that's the side of it, the dungeon master, the game master side of it, is the thing that's really kind of exciting for me, because you get to be the one telling the story, and I really do like that. But anyway, the thing that I was going to talk about a moment ago was I was trying to figure out spell casting yesterday, and so I was sat on my living room floor with 3 different manuals and Google all open, trying to figure out how spellcasting works, because one of the things Hannah is, we're doing sort of like a one-on-one kind of mini campaign thing at the moment that we might expand and kind of involve other people with later, further down the line, but for the time being it's just the 2 of us as we kind of figure out how to play and everything like that, and we're playing as we go. And as a part of Hannah's storyline, she has sort of like a mentor figure, or somebody who you could consider as a teacher or a leader or something like that. And so I've kind of made the decision within the narrative that Hannah's helped me create that this person is going to kind of come on the journey with Hannah's character for the time being. And consequently, I needed to actually kind of fully flesh out this character and really explore the details of them, even silly things like their height, their weight, their age, their general appearance, sort of their sensibilities and what drives them, what motivates them. This character is also significantly older than Hannah's character, so I've kind of got to at least have an idea of the kind of life that this character could have lived, so that then that can feed into the decision making and stuff that this character will ultimately make. And it's so enriching. It's so like it's just free. Just play, you know. And I think to my sensibilities anyway, and sort of to things that I've become sensitive to over time, there's always playing's for kids, and I could not disagree with that harder. You know, if you can't play, if you can't have fun, then surely that's miserable. Surely that's really, really sad that you can't sit with a group of friends and just prat around, you know, whether it's video games or Dungeons and Dragons or card games or any of these like wonderful board games and stuff that I've kind of recently been discovering through D&D culture, you know, all of this kind of thing. If you can't sit and have fun and play like that, then in my mind, surely you're doing something wrong. You know, there's got to be, I don't know. I think it's just fundamentally something that I don't understand, and I've spoken about this before on my previous channel. You know, because obviously, like I say, I play video games, and nowadays, I think it's probably fair to say that in one way or another, everybody is a gamer. You know, because anything that you play on your mobile phone, or you know, little things that you do on your PC or your PlayStations, your Xboxes, your Switches and all that kind of stuff, any kind of video game type format makes you a gamer to a degree. And you know, I've always struggled with that, because there was always this perception when I was younger that games were for nerds and for kids, and I consequently never really spoke about it very much. You know, I had a small circle of friends who did occasionally talk about video games, but none of them were really into it to the same level that I was. You know, if I had a choice of what I was doing with my time, it was playing video games and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, I was still very committed to my schoolwork and my homework and everything like that, but it was always a matter of, right, I need to get this homework right the first time so I can go upstairs and play my video games kind of thing. And, you know, it's just sheer joy. I love it. And it's become my favourite form of storytelling. You know, some of the stories that have kind of manifested themselves in video games over recent years have been phenomenal. You know, they challenge the best movies and TV shows and all of that kind of stuff. You know, they really do challenge that media or medium, because there's just a level of connectivity that you have with a video game and its protagonists that you don't necessarily have over a TV star or a movie star or something like that. You know, you don't have agency over what their story does. I mean, there's been some very interesting blends of, you know, kind of a multiple choice type setup within a live action space, which is always really cool to see. But to me, video games have a very, I don't know, they will always have a special place in my heart, because I fundamentally connect with the subject matter in a way that I don't with anything else. And that's special to me. That's something that I will always have, I hope. And so like as a younger child, you know, particularly at school and stuff like that, there was always this stigma against video games and nerds and stuff like that, and by some miracle, nerd has become mainstream. You know, geeks and nerds and stuff like that, that's all become mainstream. So, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies and, you know, the DC superhero movies and, you know, just comic book culture and superheroes and, you know, board games and all sorts of different things. So many of those things have turned mainstream now, which, I mean, makes my heart sing, because I love that kind of thing, and having it more readily available and widely accepted means that there's less people that can judge me for being the way I am. And so, you know, there was, like I say, I think the kind of point that I was getting at there was the fact that there's always been in my life there's always been a stigma against that kind of culture, and so, you know, it was always kind of said to me that Dungeons and Dragons is for like super nerds. You know, there's something extra about the people who play Dungeons and Dragons. They're kind of like mega nerds and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, personally speaking, I couldn't disagree more. I think it's a very freeing experience playing it. And obviously, for Hannah and I, we've only actually played it with each other. We haven't actually roped anybody into the game. But even so, just having that experience between the two of us is fantastic. It really is. It's like the ultimate improvisation, and it's absolutely wonderful. And so, the thing I was trying to figure out yesterday, sat with me books and everything, was spell casting and trying to actually figure out what the rules were, so then I could then implement that in the game the way that I maybe wanted to, something that was a little bit more digestible. And I think that's something that I've always been conscious, well, I say always, since starting to learn and play Dungeons and Dragons. There's always been this self-consciousness, because I'd love to play with other people, and I'd love to kind of meet other people through Dungeons and Dragons, because, like I say, that I don't think there's any gaming experience quite like it. A tabletop role-playing game. I don't think there's an experience quite like it, and so, I very much would love to kind of meet people in that sphere, but I've always been conscious, because I don't think I would ever be the kind of person who would be strict to the rules all the time, if that makes sense. I like fluidity in these kinds of things, bend the rules for the sake of a really interesting story moment or character moment, or character development or anything like that. Bend the rules and play with it, and sort of it's like putty in your hands. You can just sort of shape it the way you want to shape it, and I think that creative freedom is really exciting, but it's also a very fragile thing. You're kind of exposing your sensibilities and sort of unwittingly impressing your traits and desires and wants onto a fictitious fantasy character that has kind of, you're showing it to people, and it's like in a lot of ways it's kind of like an aspect of your personality, or even just something that you want to you want to mess with and play with and stuff like that. Something that I've kind of recently thought that I would want to try. I love talking like this, and it's difficult for me to do it when I'm on my own in my own space, but I'm quite good with impersonations and all of that kind of stuff, and I wish I could kind of build up the gusto to put it into video formats, record myself doing it, and kind of get that skill out there. But I'm just far too self-conscious at the moment for that kind of thing. I do it at work, which is a majority of the time a safe space with friends. I'm doing it all the time at home, and it's something that I've always wanted to explore, and Dungeons and Dragons again is an interesting kind of offshoot of that, because depending on how hard you want to go into your role playing with your character, you can pick a voice and voice that character the way you want to. And voice acting and voice performance and stuff like that is always something that has interested me. It's always, I think it's something. I was trying to find a way to describe this to somebody the other day. I think it's something that I could do. Because I care enough about sort of the presentation of things, and I'm very much a perfectionist, so I care enough about the presentation and the execution of things that I would work to get it right. And so I think it's something that I really could genuinely do. The thing that prevents me from doing it, though, is nerves, self-consciousness, a little bit of embarrassment, kind of putting yourself out there. And even though something like Dungeons and Dragons is putting yourself out there to a certain extent, voice performance on a whole other level is something totally different. And like I say, I think if I ever kind of found myself in the right environment, I could do it, or at least give it one hell of a shot. But I don't know. I think it is something that I kind of occasionally, I look to see if there's any sort of like extra work on things, to sort of see if it's something that I could maybe, I'll dip my toe in there and see how that goes, and then gradually step up from there. But I've never really committed to pursuing the opportunity, and I think for me at least, D&D is kind of the safe way of experiencing what that would be like, playing characters and writing a story and performing and, playing and messing around and stuff like that. It's something that allows me to scratch that itch without having to, subject myself to ridicule, he says, with 2 YouTube channels now. I mean, that in itself says a lot, doesn't it? But yeah, I don't know. It's been something that I've really enjoyed experiencing, and this week it's something that I've really been able to commit myself to. I've been able to commit a lot of time to it, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. Reading the rules and sort of, okay, so I have to roll this dice for this thing and then add that modifier, and, under these circumstances that doesn't work, so I have to do this at disadvantage and that at advantage and all of that kind of stuff. It's really fascinating, and I've absolutely loved playing the game with Hannah. I've loved learning the game, and it's actually been a very enriching experience for me mentally, because like I kind of have been talking about in the previous 2 episodes, there's a significant negative streak in my mentality that continuously prohibits me from doing things, whether it be small things, large things, pursuing opportunities, declining opportunities, whatever the case may be. This streak of negativity that I have continuously blocks me, and feels like I'm being kind of held back by myself almost. But I have this great creative streak as well, that even saying that, there's a pang of guilt for having worded that way, because there's nothing wonderful about you, Ryan. But I know that I do have that, I do possess that, and it's something that I thoroughly enjoy, and continuously brings me just unending quantities of happiness. And I would love to kind of use it and meet people with the same creative mindset, and work together on a long form project that would have some form of outcome to be consumed by numerous people and all of this kind of stuff. And I would love nothing more than to be a part of that kind of thing. But I don't know, I haven't quite broken through that wall to kind of just what's the worst that can happen, and just throw myself at something like that. I haven't quite broken through that ceiling yet. But it's, much like everything in life, it's a work in progress. I'm continuously sort of, I'll try small things here and there to kind of just like, okay, well, have a little bit of this world and see what you do with that. And I'm going to do this stupid thing at work and see what kind of response I get and see what people say, and just, I guess, see where the road takes me, because ultimately that's all we can do. And, it I guess, sort of in context with that kind of talk, Dungeons and Dragons seems like the least of my worries, if you know what I mean. But there is something very special about a tabletop role-playing game that just frees you, and you can just have fun, and you're at the whim of your mind all the time. If you want to come up with a random thing that just sort of pops into your head and you think, right, this is what we're doing now, you can do it. And then all of your players have got to kind of respond and react and adapt to your situation on the fly. And that kind of thrill of the moment kind of storytelling and world building that people commit to in a way that is like moving and genuine, I think it's fantastic. I really enjoy it. And so that's realistically what my mind has been completely consumed by this week. I've just loved being lost in that space, and creating my own world and my own story and my own characters, and their life choices and what motivates them and everything like that. I really have enjoyed just kind of escaping to this safe place that I have in my mind, and just seeing what comes out of it. So, but anyway, that will just about take us to the 30-minute mark. So thank you very much for listening to me. I know that this one was kind of a little bit different subject matter wise to the previous one, But ultimately, that's what this is going to be. It's very fluid and very kind of nondescript. It's just sort of a bit of everything. So yeah, I really do hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts or comments to make, please feel free to do so down in the comments section. But otherwise, take care of yourselves, be safe, and I shall see you next week. Thanks, guys.